And there we are then. So that was the feature, The Wife and Her House Husband, and we are now joined by director Marcus Markou. How are you tonight?
I'm very good. Thank you for having this film at Romford Film Festival. It's always a pleasure and an honour to be accepted, and no audience is too big or too small, so thank you.
Take a bow for yourselves. So, first question I want to ask is the concept of this movie, because it's something I've never heard of. Is this something you knew about, the Borough contract?
Normally when you write a screenplay, you write the full vision of what you want to write, and then you find the talent that will attract the finance. That's how independent film works. In this case, in this scenario, I did it the reverse, and you're never supposed to do that. I had a limited budget, and I thought, what can I do with a very small budget? And I worked out I could only afford 2 actors and a film shoot of about 2 weeks. So it started in a way that you're never supposed to start as a writer. I started with a budget and went, what can I do? So I thought, well, a husband and wife breaking up is actually a really good story when you've only got really 2 actors to play with. So it started up as a breakup story, and my original idea before I even made this was maybe a 3-day shoot with £25,000. I could improvise with 2 actors running around London, a breakup story, and I could just shoot endless footage, get some stories, throw it into the edit, and maybe get a story. And that was the original idea. And then once I started writing it, I started to bring in all the themes that you see in the film. And obviously, I wanted to get it as layered as possible so that all the assumptions the audience might make at the beginning are kind of turned on their head a little bit. Every time I'm trying to reveal information that the audience may think, oh, okay. So originally you think that they are a certain kind of couple, but then as you go deeper with the reveal of the child, you suddenly realize that this is actually a way of dealing with grief, hence the addiction as well.
And Lawrence Spellman and Laura Baston, if you're going to have 2 actors carry a movie, that's the 2 you might choose.
Well, interestingly, when I started this entire process, I actually had an actor called Jim Sturgis attached to this film, and he really wanted to do it. And I had a meeting with him for another project, and really the money I had for this was about £250,000. That was the budget. It was going to anchor a bigger project, which Jim was attached to. So during COVID, I thought, well, let's just make a film for $250 rather than like a bigger movie where the $250 would anchor the project. And Jim loved it. He said, I'm in. And he said, could we raise the profile of the piece by casting a famous actress to go opposite him? And we spent about 4 or 5 weeks looking for that actress, and we couldn't find her. For one reason or another, they were busy, it was COVID. There were some incredible actresses like being thrown about from ICM, which was his agency in America. For one reason or another, Jim had to drop out literally the night before our COVID test. So our COVID test was on the Friday. Thursday, I didn't have an actor or an actress for this film. And Laura Baston, I had never met, but I'd known very well because she was in my online improv group. During COVID, I set up a improv group where I did a lot of improv stuff in Zoom. We called it the Zoom Experimental Improv Group. And I noticed she was extraordinary and brilliant and talented and a bit weird, actually, in a good way. And Laura won't mind me saying that, because she'll just sort of give me a dead arm. But she is exceptionally brilliant in a very weird way, right? Like, she's got that something. I mean, I've worked with some great actors. I worked with Stephen Delane on my debut feature film, Papadopoulos and Sons, and Stephen has that something, right? And Laura has that something. So I got her in, and in fact, on the first day of rehearsals, when she came down to me, I waved at her, and she didn't recognize me. She thought I was a stranger. We never met on the first day of rehearsals. So that's how I got Laura in, and that night I'd made a short film with Lawrence called Two Strangers Who Meet Five Times, which is 3 million views on YouTube. So Lawrence is brilliant, and I love him. And I called him up at the last minute and said, "Are you free?" And then I had to just quickly tweak the story for their kind of characters. So we made it more of an East End story, which actually I think was a brilliant move because we, working class, when you look at the Ken Loach movies, the working class stories, always about lack of money. And it was really refreshing to put a working class story on the screen that wasn't about money, but it was about love. And we never see that. And I was really excited at the idea that I could make this a working class story where money was not the issue, but love was the issue. And we just never see that. So that was a bit of luck in the casting. And then I tweaked the story so it had references to Romford and Dagenham, and we just really played up on that kind of that world that they were from. And Laura is from that world, and Lawrence is working class, sort of second generation Irish, West London, but was able to just tap into that energy.
In a way, though, there is a third character in this movie.
There is.
We are the third character in this movie.
You are.
I would like to talk a little bit about your DOP, because
very well spotted.
We are very much... Very well spotted.
It's interesting you say that because I told Chris Ferguson, by the way, the first DOP I ever worked with who did my first short film, Last Temptation of Chris, and my feature film, Papadopoulos and Sons, which is on iPlayer, was James Friend, who won the Oscar recently for All Quiet on the Western Front. I think I've got a good eye for a DOP. I think Chris is as good as James, if not better. Chris is just not as, and James won't mind me saying this, he's just not as ambitious in that way. Does that make sense? But it's interesting you say that, and I talked to Chris extensively about what Terrence Malick has been doing with his DOP, which is to effectively, and Chris did this with I shot 2 short films with Chris, and every time we work together, we get a faster way of working. And I love the idea of because he's a camera operator, he's not the DOP that sits in a media village, right, and then has a walkie-talkie and is telling the cameraman what to do. Chris operates the camera, and we went with one lens. So effectively, I said to Chris, "You are the third character in this movie. You're an actor." And I even gave him the note. I said, "Don't tell the actors, but you are the child." I said that to him. Okay, if your attention in the story suddenly goes somewhere, I want you to channel this idea that you are the child in the story and that you are visiting your mum and dad again, and therefore you can rest the camera on their faces and just be there. Because throughout the story, with the letter, the feather, all these little synchronicities, I wanted to create, and it's not conscious, right? It's not consciously on screen. It's very much subconsciously there. The idea that there was this energy of the child that was bringing the two parents together in order to release the grief of their pain. So it's brilliant that you spotted that, because that's exactly what Chris did. And we shot off the shoulder, handheld, one lens, which meant we allowed the actors to block themselves. And Chris was given total freedom to go in and out and rest the camera on the face. And the actors were told to relax and just play with the camera, be aware with it, be comfortable with it. So and I'm so glad you picked up on that, because I just think so many people don't see that. But that was very deliberate.
I think it all sort of culminates as well for me in that last sequence, which is agonizingly, heartbreakingly beautiful, really. How did that feel to shoot that scene with the two on the...
Well, we were on a pier on the South Bank, and it was really stressful because the light is going to come up and we've got very limited amount of time to shoot that scene. So you're dealing with technical problems. Like, they wanted the Chris and the gaffer, a guy called Norbert, who's a genius, like gaffer, who can pull miracles of light from nowhere. They wanted to light the pier with these lights. And I knew, my instinct was, as a director, don't let them do it. Because it's just going to take up 3 hours and it's not going to work. And what happened? It took up 3 hours and they didn't work. And of course, everyone's looking to you as the director to lose their cool. And I just thought, we just have to make this work. So there was a lot of pressure. There was also a lot of noise. There were a lot of drunk people cycling past. So there's this insane pressure to get this scene. And I think we did it in just 2 takes. But the thing is, we'd rehearsed it for 2 weeks, that whole movie. So Lawrence and Laura were off book, like from the beginning. And I don't know if there are any filmmakers in here, but, every day of rehearsal is priceless. And I don't understand why studios and the big movie companies don't invest in rehearsals, because rehearsals create the environment by which you just can hit the ground running. And what I did with Lawrence and Laura, I even took them to every location before we started shooting, and we ran the scenes on location, just the 3 of us. It was really, really special. So we ran that scene like a week before we shot it on there, and so we got comfortable, and I know what you're saying. It's like, I think without the rehearsal, without the endless conversations, right? Continually conversations. And I treat the first rehearsal session as therapy. And I am the first person to open up in front of my actors. And I tell them everything, the whole works. And their jaws drop a little bit. And I say, this is a safe space. I've gone first. I've literally opened myself up completely here. And then I find that that's all you need to do in order to get the actors to respond in the same way. Yeah. It's really, so what you're saying, to answer your question, is getting that level of emotion is a number of things, but it starts at the very beginning with a conversation that says we're here to absolutely emotionally go naked, i.e. In the rehearsal, it's got to be like therapy. It has to be.
Yeah. So we've only got time for a couple of questions because we are running a little bit late, but do we have anyone who would like to ask a question?
First one, Will. You may have already mentioned the scene, but in all the scenes, which was the most difficult to shoot?
Let me go through. The most difficult to shoot. I don't think there was a one that stood out as the most. Yes, I remember. Outside the church, when they're like just meeting outside the church, we had 2 major constructions going on at the same time at different ends of where we were, and we tried to shut one of them down, and then we also had 2 constructions going on, and the guy from the council mowing the lawn outside. It should have been the easiest scene to shoot. And that was by far the most difficult and the most stressful, because I'm trying to get in, and we had the most incredible sound recordist, and I thought we're going to have to ADR this, and we didn't ADR it in the end. Somehow, what he did was, without getting too technical, he used radio mics and boom, and this was another filmmaking tip, get your dubbing mixer to talk to your sound recordist before we start working, and get them on the same page. And we flagged up what would we do in this situation, and she was able to blend the boom and the mics here and take out certain frequencies. I was convinced this was finished, this scene, and our sound recorders also took them off on site up where we were, and we kind of did their own ADR. They ran the whole scene with lots of padding around to block the noise. The combination of on-site ADR, mixing the radio mic and the boom, some magic by the dubbing mixer. But I was very, very stressed that day.
Do we have anyone else?
Hang on.
We'd be all the way over there.
Have I spotted one of the extras from the AA scene in here? There you are.
Really enjoyed the film, so thank you for screening. Did you say it's shot during COVID? And so was it actually a stressful filmmaking process?
Very stressful. We had an 11-day shoot and we lost 2 days to COVID. Our driver got COVID. We had to stop for 2 days. I had to rewrite the screenplay. And there was no guarantee we would get back. We all got tested. If any one of us had come back positive, the shoot would have been closed down. Because it was our driver, we could replace. But in an 11-day shoot, 11 days is tight. We shot that in 9 days, which is ridiculous. And it was incredibly stressful because the rules that you had to abide by were incredibly restrictive. But we got on and did it, and it just added, filmmaking is difficult. Low-budget filmmaking is difficult. Like, micro-budget film, doing that in COVID is almost impossible. But we did it. But yeah, it was stressful. But there was a point, actually, when I was lying in my hotel room, fully insulated, thinking, it's over. And I just got to that point of like, well, okay, so be it. It's gone, and what can I do? It was a meditation that I went on about surrender.
And with that, thank you so much for submitting the movie.
Well, thank you very much for having me and this film, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Inshallah.